In this video, we're going to be going through the process of replacing your vanity faucet. Typically, you'll have something like this underneath the sink. In this case, we have CPVC coming up into compression stops that go up into the faucet tubes. So we need to get the water disconnected. So as long as you have stops like this, this style, you just crank down until the water is off. Just that far. Sometimes you'll have a quarter turn stop where you just turn it 90 degrees and it will be off. Okay, so those should be off now. We'll just verify that it is indeed off by turning on the water. And sure enough, we have no water flow, so we know that we are good to go. Check both on the cold and hot sides. Now, if you're going to be replacing your faucet tubes, then you're going to want to disconnect it down from the actual stop. But in this case, we should be able to reuse our existing faucet tubes. So we're just going to be removing it right here on this attachment to the actual faucet up top. Once we get this disconnected, there will be a little bit of water that will drip out, so just be aware of that and be ready to clean that up if necessary. There's that side, and we'll do the same on the other side. Two water lines are disconnected now. We're going to disconnect our pop-up assembly rod. So we just loosen our set screw up here. May have to use my channel locks for that. Today we're just replacing the faucet. We're not replacing the actual drain assembly. So we can just disconnect this, and now you can see that rod will just come right out. And we can leave this existing one. We might be able to reuse this assembly here. So we'll just set that to the side. So now the only thing left that's holding this faucet in place is this retaining nut, basically, that holds that on there. And these are kind of hard to get to sometimes. It looks like a little ratchet. Wrench would work well. We can use a crescent. We can use channel lock like this, which I think we're just going to get it started this way. But they also make a tool called a faucet wrench. If the space behind the sink is really just too tight, you can use one of these faucet wrenches to get a hold of and adjust those fittings up behind the sink. There's enough space down here for this particular one that we don't really need to use a faucet wrench, which is nice. There's that. And now we'll just push the faucet up and through that hole. We just got to bend these lines in such a way that it'll all go up and through, and then we'll go up there to pull it out the rest of the way. There it is. And now we'll start installing the new faucet. The faucet we're putting in today is a no frills Moen standard single handle lab faucet, and I'll link to one of these in the description. This is probably one of your most common faucets you'll see installed places, and the cartridges are readily available. Moen has a very good warranty on their faucets to the original owner, so if you ever need parts, it's usually just like a phone call away, and you can get pretty much whatever you need. So I'll link to a few different options in the description of this video. So right underneath this video, I'll link to this same faucet if you want a no frills Moen faucet, and I'll put a couple other popular options down there as well. So this one came with a pop-up assembly, a plastic one, but there's already a nice brass assembly installed, so we're not going to be worrying about that. There's our model, which is going to be important. You put this around the pipes, typically, underneath the faucet. That way you know what model it is when you call Moen to get replacement parts. This design is a little bit different in that the pipes actually come down on either side instead of both coming down through the center. So before we set this in place, we'll go ahead and clean this up just a little bit. And there we go. So I'll go ahead and put our gasket in place. And they even label it here, hot side. The hot is always on the left for those of you who are not aware of that. But they do label it here for you, so it's a little bit even more dummy proof. Before I put this through there, it's going to be easier actually if I just attach that model number sticker to it right away. So we'll go ahead and attach this to this faucet tube on this side. This faucet was manufactured on June 19th of 2020, made in the USA. That's the other thing that's nice about Moen is most of their stuff is made in the US. All right, so we're ready to drop it in there now. Just like so. And now we're ready to go back under. But before we do that, let's go ahead and grab our new pop-up rod and drop that in. So for each side, where there's that threaded rod sticking down, this is the pattern that you're going to have the parts in. First, this cross piece that's going to hold it up against the bottom of the counter, spacer, and finally the 7/16 nut. Now obviously if your counter surface was a lot thicker, you just would not use the spacer. So there's the crossbar, spacer, and finally the nut. Now before I fully tighten these in place, we'll go up top and center the faucet. I got nicely centered up there, so we're ready to go ahead and tighten these down. It's just a 7/16 wrench, and if you have a ratcheting wrench, it makes it really handy for getting these things snugged up. You don't have to go very tight, you're just going enough to where it's not going to come loose on its own. That's all we need. So that thing is super solid in there now. It is not going to go anywhere whatsoever. Now real quick, we'll install our pop-up assembly bar here. Now when this is all the way down like this, that means that the drain is fully open inside. And then when it's fully up, that means the drain is closed, okay? So when this is all the way down, we want to be able to push this rod all the way down. So we're going to lift this just by like a 1/4 inch, because right now this is all the way pulled down. So we're going to lift this by a 1/4 inch or so and tighten it in right there. You just need to use the pliers to turn it a little bit extra from hand tight, because otherwise it does have a tendency to come loose. So about like that is all we need. So with that all clamped in place, when we pull the pop-up lever, it will lift this, which will close the drain right here. So that should be perfect. Okay, and finally we're going to connect our faucet tubes. Typically this pipe on the left should be hot. With this style, we do need to double wrench it for sure. We'll just get them started for now. And this type of faucet tube has rubber gaskets in there, so you don't have to worry about putting any thread sealant on these at all. It's going to seal on its own with the gasket that's in the end of this faucet tube. That's a sign that you've had a novice working on something. If you have thread tape or pipe dope on a fitting that is a compression or a gasket sealed fitting. I'll link to all the tools that you need for this installation in the description of the video, right underneath. So there's that one. I just got it good and snug, basically finger tight plus like a 1/4 or a 1/2 turn, something like that. Worst case scenario, if it does drip, you just have to tighten them a little bit more. Double wrenching it is imperative, as if you don't double wrench it, you will twist this copper pipe going up to the faucet and could potentially damage it significantly. It's going to be a lot closer to a 1/2 turn after it's finger tight. And this style of flexible tube does have a rubber gasket in there, so you're going to do the same thing. Just get it finger tight plus a little bit extra. I'll just feel how tight these are. You can see that it wasn't that hard to turn it a tiny bit more. I never disconnected these. I didn't have to in this case, but not a big deal if you need to spin new faucet tubes on. All right, we've got all of our connections made. Now we can go ahead and turn the water back on. And you'll just want to watch for leaks. Look right away, but then even come back in like a half an hour. Just make sure that you don't have any small drips that you didn't notice. So right there is the hot water's turned on. And the cold water. A common spot for a leak to develop is right underneath the handle of your angle stops, or your straight stops. In this case, it's a straight stop because the pipe is coming straight through. If it does start leaking right underneath here, or right underneath here, all you have to do is take and tighten that packing nut just a tiny little bit. So this is called the packing nut, and we would just tighten that just a smidgen, and that would keep that shaft seal from leaking in there. So if it starts to drip there, that should do it. Just be careful. If you tighten it and it's not working, you might just have to replace the entire straight stop or angle stop. So we can go ahead and test our pop-up assembly. You can see when I pull up, it closes it off, push it down, and it opens it up. So that is good to go. And sure enough, it is getting hot here. So the hot side is working perfectly, as well as the cold side. Go ahead and feel on it, make sure that it's not going to move anywhere, and it's nice and secure, it feels like. So we are good to go. So you can see that replacing a vanity faucet or a bathroom faucet is not that big of a deal. So again, I'll put links in the description to the faucet that I'm installing, which is a very standard single handle Moen faucet, as well as any tools that are required to get yours installed. So we can test our pop-up assembly, push it down. This came disconnected.